as prescribed by the Code of Conduct institution. We are bothered that unless our asset declaration and declared asset verification system is made efficient, contract and procurement corruption will constitute and continue to be a hindrance to our development. The scourging cost of corruption is staggering. Of the approximately $13 trillion that governments spend on projects across Africa, more than 45% is lost to contract corruption. That data from the African Union shows that Nigeria loses over $7 billion to contracts corruption annually. At the continental level, it is estimated that more than $140 billion is being wasted on contract corruption and procurement-related corruption. A figure that is equivalent of the GDP of all but 5 countries in Africa. PwC projects that corruption in Nigeria could cost up to 77% of our GDP by 2030 if we don't curtail corruption. As we all know, corruption drains and affects development. It affects governance. And because of this, public officials must be held accountable for their actions. It is not sufficient to appoint public officials. It's more important that we hold them accountable at the end of their tenure, either fixed tenure or permanent one. Further, given that there are newer windows and complex channels for hiding proceeds of corruption, particularly through such means as access by proxy, blockchain, real estate investment, all stakeholders, including the media and the Nigerian citizens, must support the Code of Conduct institution, a unique statutory mandate to receive declarations, ensure compliance, receive complaints about non-compliance with or breach of the code, investigate such complaints when received. Of facing the future, guided by the fact that openness, accountability, transparency, rule of law are the core foundation for good governance and development. We are holding this press conference on public officials, asset declaration, and declared asset verification. As a reminder to all stakeholders within the accountability ecosystem on why we must fully comply with the provisions of the extant law on laws on asset declaration. Following our asset declaration compliance survey, we are bothered that more than 94% of public officials in Nigeria do not comply with the provisions of Section 15, Subsection 1C of the CCP Act. We are further concerned about the fact that it's only the focus of asset declaration is usually on just the public officials, and that is not full disclosure, according to the extant law. The aim of this press conference is to draw attention of all stakeholders, particularly public officials. Public officials, those who are outgoing public officials, the incoming public officials, and existing public officials. That means those who work in different ministries, different agencies of government, and all that. Those who fall within the constitutional contemplation of Section 318, paragraph 19 of Part 1 and Part 2 of the 5th Schedule to the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. That the law requires all public officials, their spouses, and their unmarried children under the age of 21 to declare their assets and liabilities in the asset declarations form as prescribed by the Code of Conduct institution. We are bothered that unless our asset declaration and declared asset verification system is made efficient, contract and procurement corruption will constitute and continue to be a hindrance to our development. The scourging cost of corruption is staggering. Of the approximately $13 trillion that governments spend on projects across Africa, more than 45% is lost to contract corruption. That data from the African Union shows that Nigeria loses over $7 billion to contracts corruption annually at the continental level. It is estimated that more than 140 billion US dollars is being wasted on contract corruption and procurement-related corruption. A figure that is equivalent of the GDP of all but 5 countries in Africa. PwC projects that corruption in Nigeria could cost up to 77% of our GDP by 2030 if we don't curtail corruption. As we all know, corruption drains and affects development. It affects governance. And because of this, public officials must be held accountable for their actions. It is not sufficient to appoint public officials. It's more important that we hold them accountable at the end of their tenure, either fixed tenure or permanent one. Further, given that there are newer windows and complex channels for hiding proceeds of corruption, particularly through such means as access by proxy, blockchain, real estate investment, all stakeholders, including the media and the Nigerian citizens, must support the code of conduct institution. It needs statutory mandate to receive declarations, ensure compliance, receive complaints about non-compliance with or breach of the code, investigate such complaints when received, refer such to the Code of Conduct Tribunal. Consequently, we are holding this press conference not because this is the end of what we intend to do to ensure that public officials, Nigerians, are held accountable and being made to declare their asset as the law requires. We are holding this press conference because we want to take it further by ensuring that we have a national symposium on asset declaration and declared asset verification in Nigeria in partnership with relevant stakeholders. Relevant stakeholders including the Code of Conduct institutions, including the both arms, the tribunal inclusive, the media, anti-graft agencies, and all relevant institutions in the country. Our aim, as we said earlier on, is to ensure that public officials, those who have been trusted with public trust, are made to account for their time in office. But over time, it has been discovered that we only focus on the public officials. But the law is clear. The CCPT Act specifies clearly that it is not about the public officials alone. It is even more about their spouses and the children under the age of 21 who are not married. The forms to be filled must contain the assets and liabilities of such persons at the material time to which the public official is filling such form. And that is why this press conference and the subsequent symposium we are going to be holding is very fundamental. It's very important. We've finished the election, but again, we have to get into governance. But for us to get into governance, we must be able to ensure that those who are coming into office, that we know exactly what they have. So that by the time they are leaving office, either by proxy or through what they have, we're able to hold them accountable and hold them to account for what they've acquired in office. And their liabilities as well. And for those that are going out, it is very fundamental that we have to know exactly what they have. That is the only way this country can make progress, because corruption has affected every bit of who we are as a country. And we cannot continue. Our generation cannot tolerate any longer the idea that politics is the only enterprise that should work in the country. The idea that corruption is the only thing that can pay a young person. No. We want a system that is functional, we want a system that is accountable, we want a system that is transparent, we want a system that is open. And public service must be about service to the people and not to listen to people's treasury. That is why this press conference is not just about fixing the future, it's about the future of Nigeria. So I want to thank you, and by all means, within the confines of the law, our policies and our governance system must be made to be accountable. The specific call, as I rightly said, is the aim of this conference. It's specifically to call on all public officials. And there are 3 components to it. Number 1, they are all outgoing, appointed, or elected public officials. All elected or to be appointed public officials, or public officials within the contemplation of what Part 2 of the 5th schedule to the 1999 Constitution, as amended, rightly defined as public officials. They are the ones we are calling on. For the Code of Conduct institutions, right, we understand the fact that the current chairman of the institution and the institution itself is working very hard by the means to which they've designed a digital form for public officials to fill the form. Of course, so what we're saying is that we are calling on the public officials themselves for full compliance. Full compliance. The law says it is not about the public officials alone. Their spouses and their children that are under the age of 21 must also fill their assets and their liabilities. So the idea, and what we found out on our own part too, through our asset compliance survey that we had, is that it seems that public officials only just fill the form and leave leave out the part or the component that require their spouses' assets to be filled as well. So we don't want that kind of partial or half compliance. We want full compliance by public officials. We want a situation where when you are filling the form, you are filling also what your kids, what your wife that are under the age that the law specifies. The law says 21 years old that are not married, that are children, right? They must also declare their own assets. So we are calling on public officials, number one. And then we're also seeking support for the Code of Conduct institution. They alone cannot do it. Over time, the Code of Conduct institution has complained of lack of adequate funding for the institution. So we're also calling on citizens. If you have any knowledge of anywhere that a public official within your community is having one asset, you have a right under the Freedom of Information Act to write to the institution that is responsible, which is the Code of Conduct institution, right? To ensure that you indicate that this person has also assets. It's not winch hunting. You are not saying that did this person capture this in his Code of Conduct, asset, the Code of Conduct declared assets. It is not the responsibility. It forms part of the complaint, which is one of the core fundamental statutory duties of the institution. So our first call is for the public officials to abide or comply fully with the provisions of the law.
Okay, thank you very much.
Initially, we said that we have the asset declaration survey, compliance survey that we conducted, right? What we've discovered from our report shows that the report will also be unveiled on at the National Symposium on Asset Declaration and Declared Asset Verification program we're having by the 1st of June. The report indicates that compliance on the issue that has to do with public officials on their own declaring assets is almost 99% being complied with. However,
How many percent?
99% being complied with. However, that is not what the law requires. Yeah, if you're given an assignment and you've done it halfway, you've not done anything really. The report shows that nearly 34% have not complied from 1999 to date. As a matter of fact, from 1989, when the legal instrument that brought the Code of Conduct institutions came into effect.
89?
19, yes, under the Bangda regime. So our founding has shown that there is partial compliance with that provisions of the law. 34% is an abysmal level of compliance with the provisions of the law. And so it does not in any way at all have it doesn't reach the pass mark. And we're saying that there must be full compliance. Our public officials, spouses, their children that are within the age of 21 years as the law requires must also fill the assets. We do not want a situation where someone buys, acquires property in the name of his kids, in the name of the wife, in the name of the mothers, and everyone around the person. And then when you're coming to fill the form, you're only filling one or two things that are in your own name. No, that is not what we want from our public officials. Our public office must be about service, must be about accountability, must be about transparency, and it must be about service to Nigerian people, really. Place as Nigerians, right, to be patriotic enough to understand the fact that if someone has a property in someone else, through someone else, that we can actually report that kind of person either to the anti-graft agency or to the Code of Conduct institutions. It's at the place where we want to be sincere to ourselves. It will be difficult for us to say that the Code of Conduct institution on their own will be able to verify on the face value all the claims that the public officials will make. It is now incumbent on we, the people, right, to begin to see how, beyond just doing that for the sake of the whistleblowing policy, to take it further, to ensure that we are doing it for the love of our country, for patriotic interest, really. Because to be honest with you, it's more about citizens' character crisis in this country. If I'm going to make such complaints, if I'm going to give such information, classified information, right, am I doing it for the best interest of the country? Am I doing it because I'm expecting something. The idea basically is that we have not gotten to that level of technological advancement where on the part of the code of conduct, verification institution, they're able to verify. And that is why we are also calling on Nigerians themselves, who may have one or two information relating to undeclared assets, assets that have left out, assets that have been held by proxy on behalf of these public officials, to also report same. And of course, we can also begin to see how do we now support the institutional process of investigation. Because verification is a core problem. Verification of assets declared, that had a core problem. I can declare I have 5. And what if even the 3 I have that I'm holding in proxy within the family can be verified as well? So we must also call on the institution to be strengthened as well, so that they will have more technological and also the manpower strength to ensure that when assets are being declared, that the verification process becomes very efficient and very functional, really. Okay, the law does not, the law as it is today, except if amended, the law as it is today does not say or does not require that the asset be published publicly. Exactly. So what we are calling on, of course, there's a bill at the National Assembly at the moment that is calling for a review of the extant law, right? What we are calling for at the moment is that the way the law is today, let's obey the law until when the law is being amended. And we're also calling on the 10th National Assembly. They should look also towards that aspect of public or open declaration of the asset. But we must obey the law as it is today.